I had entitled my message this morning, Thanks Be to God. And then somehow it changed a little bit, and now we're going to call it Thanksgiving Can Change Your Life. It was the day before Thanksgiving. An elderly man in Phoenix called his son in New York. And he said to him, "Son, I hate to ruin your day, but I have to tell you that your mother and I are divorcing. 45 years of misery is enough. We're sick of each other. So you call your sister in Chicago and you let her know, okay?" Well, frantic, the son called his sister and she just exploded on the phone. "They're not getting divorced. There's no way that's going to happen. I'll take care of this." So she called Phoenix immediately. And she said to her father, "You are not getting a divorce. Don't do a single thing until I get there. I'm calling my brother back and we'll both be there tomorrow. Until then, don't do a thing. Do you hear me?" The man hung up the phone and he turned to his wife and said, "Okay, honey, the kids are coming for Thanksgiving and they're paying for their own tickets." I wish that was my story. On Thursday, we will be all gathering together with our family, and hopefully we will remember to do more than just eat a meal and watch football or make a mad dash to the mall. The Thanksgiving holiday gives us a perfect opportunity to transform our lives from those of griping and dissatisfaction of lives to joy and gratitude. Thanksgiving is a good holiday for us to turn a corner and become grateful people. God wants nothing more than for us to be a people of thanksgiving and gratitude. A man by the name of Alan Perkins says, "A thankful spirit is one of the key distinguishing marks of a Christian. It sets us apart from the world. It makes us different. Psalm 118:1 says, 'Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever.'" What are some of the benefits of a grateful spirit? Or I like to call it the attitude of gratitude. Now, why do you think being a thankful person is so important? Well, I think it's because gratefulness is good for us. There are so many ways of being a grateful person, and it can benefit us, and it can benefit you. Down in Mexico, there's a region where the hot springs are right next to the cold springs. They're found side by side. The tourist was down there one day, and he noticed that the women were bringing their laundry, boiling it in the hot springs, and then dragging it up and putting it down in the cold springs. He asked his guide, "You think that Mother Nature is generous to be freely supplying such ample clean hot and cold water? Do you think they're grateful for that?" The guide replied, "No, senor. They are much more grumbling because she supplies no soap." Being a grateful person can increase your personal happiness. Most of us think that our happiness is determined by our circumstances. If I asked you on a scale of 1 to 10, tell me about how happy you are right now. Well, you might say, "Oh, I'm a 2 in the happiness scale because this is going on in my life," or a 5 or a 7, whatever. We've all been taught that our happiness is somehow dependent on how well things are going for us. But really, our happiness is determined by our attitude. It's really in just how you see things. The Apostle Paul wrote these words from prison. Yes, prison. "Rejoice in the Lord always," he wrote. "And again I say rejoice." That's from Philippians 4:4. Paul was happy despite being in prison, and how he learned to thank God in everything that he did. It was just his perspective on life. Perspective. A young woman wrote to her mother from college, "Dear Mom, sorry I haven't been writing you sooner. My arm has been really broken lately. I broke it, and my left leg too, when I jumped from the second floor of my dormitory. We had a fire, but we were lucky. A young service station attendant saw the blaze, and he called the fire department. They were there so quickly. I was in a hospital only for just a few days. Paul, the service station attendant, came to see me every day. Oh, he was so nice. I loved talking to him. I moved in with him. I must admit, I'm pregnant. Paul and I plan to get married just as soon as he can get a divorce. I hope things are fine at home. I'm doing fine, and I'll write you just as soon as I get a chance. Love, your daughter Susie. P.S. Mom, none of the above is true, but I did get a C in sociology and I flunked chemistry. I just wanted you to receive the news in proper perspective. Happiness is really determined by your perspective in life, not by circumstances. If we learn to be grateful people, despite what's going on in our lives, then we can greatly improve our happiness. A few years ago, a doctor at the university in Nebraska, I was going to say his name, but it's about that long, he was conducting a group of studies called the Family Strengths Research Project. The doctor and his researchers identified 6 qualities that make strong families. The first quality was found to be appreciation. Families are strong in part because family members express to each other their appreciation for what other members do and for who they are. Another study looked into the effect of praise in the workplace. His study showed that the ratio of praise to criticism in the workplace needs to be 4 to 1. Wow. There must be 4 times as much praise as there is criticism before they feel good about themselves and their work and the environment in which they work in. This tells us that if we want to do something good and have a healthy family or a strong workplace or any other effective group, that we need to make sure that appreciation, praise, and thanksgiving are heard at least 4 times as often as the criticism. Being a grateful person will also enhance your relationships. I've noticed some married people out there, after a while, they become ungrateful and unappreciative of their spouses. Imagine that. Over time, they kind of take each other for granted. The first few years of marriage, their husband seeing their wife has a cold would say, "Oh, honey, you don't look good. You should go to the hospital. I already have arranged it, and I know how bad the food is there, but we're going to have everything catered in." Okay. The second year, he says, "You don't look so good, honey. I've called the doctor. Go lay down, and I'll take care of the kids. The doctor will be right over." The third year, "You know, honey, you're not looking so hot. When you're done feeding the kids and cleaning up the kitchen, you really ought to go lay down." The fourth year, oh my, "Would you quit walking around here barking like a seal? You're going to give me your cold." The longer we become more familiar with each other, the less thankful we are for each other. Just imagine how much better our church relationships would be if we expressed our thanks for each other from time to time. Instead of just picking at each other or pointing out their faults, what if we just stopped and became grateful for one another? The Apostle Paul began most of his letters in the Bible in a very specific way. To the church in Rome, he wrote, "First, I thank God for all of you," from Romans 1:8. To the church in Corinth, "I always thank God for you," 1 Corinthians 1:4. To the church in Ephesus, "I have not stopped giving thanks to you, remembering you in my prayers," from Ephesians 1:16. To the church in Philippi, "I thank my God every time I remember you," from Philippians 1:3. And the last, to the church in Colossae, I'm not sure I'm saying that right, "I always thank God when I pray for you," from Colossians 1:3. Paul made sure that he let people in the churches know that he was thankful for them. Imagine how much better our church and our relationships would be if we expressed thanks for each other. There is something inside each of us that needs to give thanks to God. After spending time giving thanks to God for all we have, you just can't help but feel close to him. Right? I think that is exactly why in 1 Thessalonians 5:18 it says, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." It is God's plan, his will for us to give thanks to him. That's why he made us, or one of the many reasons why he made us. So what are some ways we can develop thanksgiving in our lives? Well, some ways we can become more grateful people. First, if we want to be thankful, remember that everything we have is from God. Acknowledge that everything we have is God's and not ours. Psalm 24:1 says, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it." When we do this, it reminds us that it is a privilege that God has loaned us everything we have. 1 Corinthians 4:7 says, "What do you have that you do not receive from God? And if you did not receive it, why do you boast as though you did not?" That doesn't make sense. The story is told of a poor man who was given a loaf of bread. He thanked the baker, but the baker said, "Don't thank me. Thank the miller who made the flour." So then he went and found the miller, and he thanked the miller. But, of course, the miller said, "Don't thank me. Go and thank the farmer who planted the wheat." So he thanked the farmer. But, the farmer said, "Don't thank me. Thank the Lord. He gave the sunshine and the rain and the fertility to the soil. And that is why you have bread to eat." Everything we own, we ultimately received from God, and we owe him thanks. James 1:17, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like the shifting sand. Secondly, if we want to be thankful, we need to avoid complaining. That makes sense. Dr. Dale Robbins writes, "I used to think people complained because they had a lot of problems. But I've come to realize that they have problems because they complain." Complaining doesn't change anything or make situations better. It amplifies frustration, spreads discontent and discord. Complaining makes us miserable. Psalm 77:3 says, "I complained, and my spirit was overwhelmed." Complaining is the arch enemy of thanksgiving. I feel like I'm in a superhero costume here now. The two cannot coexist in the same heart. So I challenge you to try to quit complaining for a while, maybe for a whole month. Just try it, see what happens. When you feel tempted to complain, instead of filling your complaint, file a praise. It will change your life. I think so. Philippians 2:13 says, "Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God, without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe." A last thing that we can do to produce a spirit of thanksgiving is to develop the daily discipline of giving thanks. In order to be thankful people, we need to start to give thanks every day. Not just once a year, not just every time you get in the vicinity of a turkey on Thanksgiving. We need to discipline ourselves to find something each day that we could be thankful for, and then express that thanks to God. Maybe create a journal, a diary or something, or a file on our computers where we just list the things God has done for us. Call it a praise file. Thanksgiving must become a daily habit. Ephesians 5:19 says, "Sing." I love this one. "Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God for everything." Always is the key word. Not just on Thanksgiving, every day. In Daniel 6, it says Daniel got down on his knees 3 times every day and prayed and gave thanks to his God. How many of us do that? The only time in our lives we give thanks, is it on Thanksgiving Day? Just this one time a year, just because the government mandates it as a holiday? There's an old hymn, "When life's billows you are tempest-tossed, when you are discouraged thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done." Thanksgiving is a daily routine. It's a daily discipline. It's been said that if you own one Bible, you are abundantly blessed. Because 1/3 of the people in the world do not have access to a Bible. If you awoke this morning with more health than illness, you are more blessed than 1 million people who will not survive the week. If you have never experienced the danger of war, loneliness, or imprisonment, or the agony of torture, or the pangs of starvation, you are more fortunate than 500 million people on earth. If you have food in your refrigerators, clothes on your back, a roof over your head, $20 in your pocket, and have a place to sleep, you are richer than 75% of the people in the world. That's a lot. Now, Thanksgiving messages always seem to sound like they're scolding, and we ought to give thanks. I know, I just said that. Think about all the things you have, and all the other people have, and all the people that have nothing. There. Now give thanks. Don't concentrate on what's missing. Be grateful for what you have. Give thanks now. Ungrateful people are losers. Give thanks. The problem, guilt is more terrible motivation for giving thanks. It's just a terrible motivation. I read Bible passages instructing me to give thanks all the time. It can sound the same way in the Bible. Rejoice always. Pray continually. Give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Jesus Christ. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-18. Anybody ever grumpy? Get up grumpy in the morning? Not quite feeling like the day? Sometimes you just want to talk back to the Scripture. Don't tell me to be happy. You think I could do this from the outside? Here's my happy coat. All right? Why don't you put your happy coat on? And yet, giving thanks is the will of God. So it is the will of God. Shouldn't I just simply try harder, be obedient, and just say thank you? Let me try something. 2 words. Thank you. Can we all say that together? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
That wasn't so hard, was it? Yeah. As we approach Thanksgiving in the United States this year, I'm beginning to discover there's a difference between giving thanks and having a thankful heart. I'm also beginning to discover that God cares more about thankfulness that flows from the inside out than the obedience we wear like a cheap suit. Let the peace of Christ rule in our hearts, since as members of one body, we are called to peace. And be thankful. Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through songs, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. From Colossians 3:15-16. Do you think God is honored when we tell him what we think he wants to hear? Even though we don't believe it? Do you think he does? God is honored, and we are healthiest when our hearts and minds flow naturally with his. In this season, we do well to recognize that included in the flow is a heart condition called thankfulness. Let me conclude here with a list of questions you can ask to test whether you are a grateful person or not. 6 questions. Which do you tend to talk about more, your blessings or your disappointments? Number 2. Are you a complainer, always grumbling, always finding fault with your circumstance? Are you content with what you have or always dissatisfied and wanting more? Do you find it easier to count your blessings, or is it easier to count your afflictions? Number 5. Do you express thanks to others when they help you, or do you just take it as your due? Number 6. And here's an important one. What would others say about you? Would they say you are a thankful person? How do you seem to others? I leave you with those words this morning. Thank you.